feel like you should put some hold music on.
I should what?
He should put some hold music on for this.
Do 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 do. Oh, he's back.
This week on SailFaster, we are talking about junior sailing, and not as a kids program, but more as a performance pipeline that makes fleets faster and racing better. To unpack that, I'm joined by Madde Vachon and Travis Carlisle from the Severn Sailing Association in Annapolis, two people who spend their days right at the sharp end of junior sailing, inspiring sailors who don't just learn the basics, but learn how to race properly. We'll dig into what adult racers usually misunderstand about junior programs, what these kids are already better at than most of us, and why strong junior sailing quietly raises the level of an entire fleet. If you've ever been rolled by someone half your age, this one is worth a listen. Madde, Travis, hello and welcome to SailFaster.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
When adult racers hear junior sailing program, what do you think they usually misunderstand about that?
So I think the biggest thing that they misunderstand about it is how often they're on the water. A lot of people see junior sailing as maybe just a summer thing. It is a year-round program at most yacht clubs and sailing programs that have them. They're going down to Florida, they're going to Europe, they're doing a lot of different things. So it's not just that, 9 to 5 day camp during the summer.
That's really interesting. The first thing is that they're just spending hours on the water, right? Doing drills, working as teams and individuals and so on. Is there anything else that people misunderstand, do you think?
So typically when our junior sailors are here, most of our general membership is at work, at their full-time job, 9 to 5. And they don't realize that by the time they get to the club at 5 o'clock, these kids have already been on the water for 8 hours. So their amount of practice that they have in relation to how much they will race during membership time, the ratio is just so outstanding. They just have so much more time on the water that people don't see.
If only we could forget this work thing and just spend all our time doing that. So what do you think that adults underestimate about these kids?
I think the biggest thing that they underestimate is how fast they can go from silly, obnoxious children, kids, teenagers to I'm full on in race mode. That switch flips for them so quickly. Notice, I think a lot of the older membership that we've experienced are like, why are they not paying attention to every little detail on land? They already know that because they've been sailing for so long and they know how to set their boat up. And two, they're nonchalant on the shore activities are part of what gets them locked into being on the water. They're not always in their head about being on the water. So we find that switch flip is so much quicker for those junior sailors, where us adults, we're like spending all morning getting in the right mindset and getting serious, where those kids are just, as soon as they hit that water, it's game on. Let's go race.
So in preparation for this podcast, I actually reached out to some members and one of them came back and said this: we underestimate how much time and energy these young sailors are willing to put into practice, training, travel, etc. Cold and wet days, they're still out there, often smiling and laughing upon their return to the club. I think we underestimate how well they can do against adult racers on the same course. And I think we underestimate how well juniors can do crewing for us adults.
Really, really interesting. And those are actually all the issues that we're going to get into over the next 45 minutes or so. Okay, let's talk about you two. So, Madde, what's your role at the SSA? And what part of junior sailing do you spend the most time thinking about?
At SSA, I'm the junior operations manager. I also do some other club-wide activities. I've been in junior sailing. This is my 23rd year in the career of junior sailing coming up. And what I think about the most is how to make the pipeline complete. I really want to see more sailors on the race course as they age out of high school and college programs. And I really want to see them expand their horizons on how many boats they're willing to go into and really love sailing for their lifetimes.
Yeah, the pipeline is an issue we're going to talk about, isn't it, in a few minutes. But Madde, you were telling me earlier, you're a Bostonian, right?
Yeah, not a true Bostonian. I'm from a little town south of Boston called Scituate. I grew up there sailing with my family. When I graduated college, I bought a sailboat, as most psychos do. I bought a 38-foot Sparkman Stevens Kelly, a 38. I started racing that, living on it when I could. And then in during COVID, I moved down here to Annapolis just for the winter until it all blew over. And I am still here.
Big boats, not dinghies.
It was my pipeline. I grew up in the big boat pipeline. I still coached and taught youth to sail on smaller boats, but the way that I was raised and the pipeline that I was put into was big boats. So that really created who I am. I started coaching junior sailing when I was at the ripe old age of 14. We had a community sailing program in the town I grew up in. We started with 3 learn to sail boats. And by the time I left, we had 6 learn to sail boats, 6 420s, a J24, and 4 power boats. But once I graduated school, I kind of realized that sailing was the thing for me. So I got my captain's license. I started teaching women's classes in Massachusetts. I had Sail Like a Girl LLC, which was really fun. Teaching kind of like that suddenly in command type of thing. Like if your partner falls overboard or is disabled, you need to be able to turn the boat around and be able to manage your own boat. And then I was doing offshore deliveries for a long time, which was a lot of fun. And I gained a lot of ocean miles doing that, racing just in places that I would end up, jumping on boats in the Bahamas or jumping in boats in Florida and things like that, and just gaining experience wherever I could on the race course.
Fabulous. Travis, what's your role at SSA and how involved are you with sailors actually on the water?
Yeah, so I'm the junior sailing program director at Severn Sailing Association, and I'm pretty involved in the on the water side of junior sailing. I specifically coach 4 high school programs in the fall and spring seasons, 1 private, 3 public schools. So a lot of variance there with who you're coaching and who you're talking to in terms of parents and schools and such. So yeah, I'm on the water with them every day, running practices, running training sessions. And I work a lot with the sailors during the junior program when they're not wanting to get out on the water. And I'm the one kind of being like, hey, like, let's figure out why you don't want to be on the Opti or why you don't want to be on the FJ, and find a way to set you up for success and not struggle. So we work with the coaches at the end of the weeks, just be like, hey, what's going on? How's your class going? What do we need to work on? What are you struggling with? So we're definitely more of that admin role in the summer, but on the water, I do a lot of stuff with the training sessions.
Yeah, it's not easy to be a kid and to be thrown into that kind of environment, right? Highly competitive. You may not quite know what sport you like yet. You may not have figured out how to socialize properly. That's not easy at all. And it's interesting how I've talked to quite a few sailors who did not like those first few years. It was quite difficult to go through that. So interesting.
Yeah, it's certainly tough. I find a lot of kids start sailing in high school in Annapolis, and there's also plenty that start in Optis at age 5. So that difference in skill level tends to hurt them a little bit. They don't know why they can't keep up, but it's great because that's when I started sailing. I really competitively, I didn't start until 9th grade. So I can relate to that group that's coming into their freshman year and not having an understanding of the sport of racing sailboats.
So I'm interested in something that you both grew up quite different backgrounds in terms of sailing. You grew up perhaps more formally, Travis. Madde grew up sailing with family. But those early sort of formative experiences, especially when you were coached, how much does that sort of play into the way that you run the sailing schools now?
I'm in a position where I've run a junior sailing program. I've been a coach, I've been a student, and right now it's more important for me to help coaches get to where we want them to be. And, we're really proud of the coaches that we create and the coaches that we develop and how they reflect on our program on and off the water.
That's really interesting. So your focus is actually on sort of teaching the teachers, as it were.
Right.
Yeah, really good. How about you, Travis?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing in my growing up in junior sailing was my program director at my sailing club. And he was all about the Corinthian spirit of racing sailboats. And so I brought that with me to SSA. I think the biggest quote that I give the kids and the coaches every single year is the Pete quote, where, and if winning a race, you've lost the respect of your competitors, you're not winning the race. And I bring that wholeheartedly to SSA. I've benched some of our best sailors at major qualifiers for being disrespectful to other sailors on the water and judges on the water. So that is something that if you're coming to SSA and you're coming to a program, having that kind of methodology behind it is really important. You have to have something that shows, hey, this is the vibe of the program. This is what you're stepping into. And when you've created that kind of building blocks, it just keeps going and it really filters in the right people into your program. And we've seen a lot of success with that. And I've gotten a lot of compliments from other programs, other yacht clubs, that our kids have been super respectful. Our coaches have been super respectful. So having that background really impacted how I run this program.
Let's get to the key issue here, which is how does a strong junior sailing program translate into more races on the starting line 5 or 10 years later? What's that pipeline like? And also what sort of interrupts that pipeline and what keeps it together?
I see junior sailing up to the end of the pipeline or beyond as a pyramid. And at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the biggest group of sailors, which is your junior sailors, maybe an optees or something that you're starting out with. And as things get tougher, the amount of participation goes down. Building a bigger base will ultimately lead to a bigger top, but also creating something that expands through the pipeline is that just pure love of the sport. Not a lot of kids, not every kid will come in thinking that, first place is the ultimate thing that you can do in sailing. It's more, I want to be able to charter a boat when I'm older. I want to be able to, go to the Caribbean. I want to be able to go out on a Wednesday night and race against all of these people that I've been racing against for my whole life. So the top is not just America's Cup and Sail GP and the Olympics classes, but it's also going out on a Wednesday night beer can series and seeing the people on the course out there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with all of that. It's just building that love of the sport. I think the biggest mistake that I see that breaks that pipeline is the burnout, constant pushing of the coaches, constantly pushing these kids way too hard, way too fast. The expectations are way too high and they just don't give them any fun. It's training, training, training with no fun as a backbone of what they're doing. So these kids get really serious about opti racing and then they age out of opties and they turn into a kid that goes and plays basketball for the rest of their, high school careers, middle school careers, or whatever other sport that they're doing. So it's really easy to get kids away from sailing. Sailing's hard. So pushing them to constantly achieve these crazy goals at that level is something that I see push more kids out than ever.
Another thing that will break the pipeline is poor coaching. That's why we're so focused on bringing good coaches with good attitudes and good Corinthian spirit into our program, because coaches really make your program. Poor coach hiring will break the pipeline really quickly. Everybody has a coach in one sport or another that made them turn away from the sport. But if you have good coaches throughout your entire sport career, it really helps build you up in that sport.
Yeah, I think the other thing that helps build the program is just adding on to that consistency of your program, not constantly trying to change your identity as a program, filling in what fits your sailing program and your membership and pushing those kids in the right direction. If they're no longer a fit for your program, having that conversation with the parents and pushing them towards a program that makes more sense to them is super helpful, because that's just going to come back to you as a club. That parent is going to talk super highly of your program. They're going to talk super highly about your coaching staff. So giving the kids the push in the right direction. I find some programs are selfish and that can hurt them by just trying to retain as many sailors as possible and looking at their bottom dollar, when realistically our goals as junior sailing programs should be to inspire and make these kids want to continue on with this sport for the rest of their life.
So when junior programs feed into adult fleets and adult racing, what do you notice that changes on the race course?
I would say their extroverted attitude, for better or for worse. Some adults have given us feedback that, they kind of played easy with their junior competitors, while others won't let them into the box. And they'll just fight tooth and nail to keep them out because they're hooligans and they're young and, they can't beat me. I've been doing this for 45 years. I think both of those attitudes have their place and they can be helpful. Letting the kids experience kindness on the race course translates into how they treat their competitors in the future. Keeping the field challenging keeps them learning and adapting and fighting in those real life scenarios.
That is really interesting. So you've seen people kind of sort of push them out of the box just because they don't believe they're ready for it. What's going on there, do you think?
I think the biggest thing is it's a boat that they can beat on the course. They see it as a boat that's an easy out. It's, hey, like, welcome to the big leagues moment almost. You're not with the juniors anymore. So I think you have that side of things. You got some cutthroat sailors out on the water sometimes, and then you have the sailors that are really encouraging to these kids. I sail in the snipe fleet, and whenever one of the junior boats finishes in the top 3, they get so much encouragement from the fleet. So you can see both sides of the coin, but I do think they get a lot of encouragement when they do well, because the members of that club and that area wants to support really talented sailors that are coming out of their place, and they want to encourage them to make their way up and be like, hey, I raced against that guy and now he's in Sail GP, or I raced against that guy and now they're racing around the world.
Thinking about the sort of impact on an entire fleet, does the addition of junior sailors make that racing tighter, faster, better? What's your experience?
I think it definitely has an effect. If you put good junior sailors onto a race course that really start to challenge the other boats in the fleet, yeah, I think it does get tighter and faster. And I think it kind of wakes up those other competitors to say, hey, there might be some things that I need to learn. I don't think a lot of them have the opportunity to get professionally coached, where our kids go on the water every day and get professionally coached. I've seen PHRF fleets get tighter when junior boats are introduced. Yeah, it pushes those old dogs to learn new tricks sometimes, which is just something that we need out there.
So it's interesting, Madde, you talked about old dogs and new tricks. What can and do older sailors learn from the junior sailors?
Starts are going to be the biggest thing. And I know that probably hits on almost every sailing podcast that probably ever comes out is starts. But these kids are starting, 15 to 20 starts per day, 4 or 5 days a week. They're getting reps in and just constantly starting. So their routine is so dialed in when it comes to starting a race. And I find that in the adult fleets, a lot of adults are just kind of like, I'll fit into whatever hole's available to me when I'm ready to get to the line. And a lot of times that's too late. And it doesn't give you an opportunity to set up for what you want to do. You can make all the plans in the world before you start a race, but if you can't execute and get to that side that you want to get to, then all that theory of execution is out the window. You got to kind of go to plan B or C or even D of finding half lanes and quarter lanes. So the approach to the start and how they do it is so important. The boat handling, they'll throw tacks, jibes, do wind shots throughout the entire sequence. They're checking the ends of the lines to know, hey, was there a shift in the last 30 seconds? And then they're even tossing their water bottles over the side of their boats and seeing which way the current's taking them. So they're doing all this. They're running the line, and they're constantly just gathering information, which is what the pros do. If you ever have a pro on your boat, that's what they're having you do. They're having you go through all of that pre-start homework.
For junior sailors, this just becomes their standard operating procedure again and again, presumably. The other thing we talked about the other day was just about acceleration, knowing innately the sort of acceleration of the whatever boat you're on.
Yeah, that was a thing that I think every person should go out and do. There's a drill that I like to do in the J70 that I sail on, and even I have our kids do it at the high school level. And that's, for an acceleration, go find any sort of mark. Day marker, lobster pot, crab pot, wherever you are. Find something stationary in the water and practice how long it takes you to get to full speed and hit that mark. And then once you understand, okay, it's going to take me 10 seconds to get to my full speed upwind mode. Now you can set a race timer on your clock, whether it be 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And now you can practice, okay, I'm going to approach, and then I'm hopefully my bow is going to be on this mark at 0. That's my goal. If I'm like, a meter or two back, no big deal, but that's what you're trying to hit. And that's something you can do before every single race. Just find something on the race course that you can do an acceleration into. And now your team knows, okay, it's going to take us 10 seconds to get accelerated. We need this much space. So now we know we can't pull the trigger at 5 seconds. We need to pull the trigger at 10 or even 8 if it's going to keep you your hole. But just knowing that speed and distance is so important.
And I suppose if you've done it again and again and again, almost daily, then you start to understand in different conditions. You've got a 2 knot current, a 3 knot current, side current, whatever it is, the
Yep.
different wind speeds, because that'll presumably it's going to affect that time it takes to get to the line.
Yeah, it sure is. And like I said, like that's something you can do before every race to understand how long it's going to take you to get accelerated in those conditions on that day. And you can do that between races. That's an easy thing to do between races. Do a couple practice accelerations. It's worth it. That'll help monumentally and in your starts.
One of the people that I race with that owns a J70 was really involved in our adventure sailing program over the couple of years that we did it. And he said that juniors on the boat keep him in teaching mode. He said when a local junior sailor at his club was younger and racing lasers, he would want to go out early on Fridays for evening racing. He was really shy. He's not shy anymore. He's actually a college coach now. But he would ask him to tell me all your tricks. And I think that that's that's one of those things, like you're looking to the adults in your life who have been doing this for so many years, and you're like, tell me, give me all of your knowledge, and he just said that he loves when the kids on his boat are interested in learning new things.
Yeah, it sort of goes both ways, doesn't it? If you have a younger person on your boat, you can understand the sort of drills that they go, and you can interrogate them about what the most useful drill is. So what else do you think junior sailors focus on that older sailors often have sort of drifted away from over time?
Definitely boat handling.
I'm definitely on board with that. Boat handling. But dinghy boat handling is different. Every step matters. Every movement matters in a dinghy. So when you get into the keelboat side of things, it's actually funny how much better the boat handling is from the kids. The adults just know the boat a little better in terms of sail trim and angles and what works in that boat. But you'll see the boat handling, the tacks, the jibes, everything is a little smoother on a junior boat because they are focused all the time on every little movement matters. A lot of the adults that get into the keelboats, they're like, oh, it's a keelboat. I've sailed some keelboats with some really heavy footed people. And there is consequence to moving heavy on a boat and racing. And I think that the juniors really show that the boat handling in the dinghies transfers over to the keelboat sailing regardless. And so does so they're rig tuning stuff too. They're constantly tuning rigs and stuff. There are some adults that I think get really into the rig tuning, but it's very few and far in between. Some people kind of are set it and forget it kind of people and aren't doing these minor tweaks where the kids are constantly tweaking their boats between races. If when the wind goes up, they're moving shrouds down, they're moving forestay tension, they're constantly, where am I on the tune? What's going to make me faster? That every little inch, meter, centimeter counts.
They also have a really unique scenario where, they're racing on the Chesapeake, which in the summer is generally the lightest air you're ever going to find to practice in. So when they travel and they go to places like Florida or South Carolina or New England, and they get a really light day, they're podium, right? Like they know exactly what to do in any conditions.
So are you suggesting that then older sailors tend just not to go out when it's light?
Yes.
Yeah, they either don't go out when it's light or they don't go out when it's really heavy. There's a lot of fair weather sailors that will only go out if it's between 10 and 18. And if it's below that or over that, they have second thoughts.
Do juniors think differently about mistakes?
Yeah, they do. I think in the moment, they're a little bit better about just kind of putting it in the back of their head and moving on. But I think honestly, long term, their thought process on their mistakes is actually more detrimental than adults because they still have a hill to climb. They still have aspirations of, I want to go to the Olympics. I want to go to SailGP. I want to go do this with my sailing career. So their aspirations are really high as a young sailor. So when they have a really bad event, I think that actually sticks with them a lot longer than when an adult has a bad event, because as adults, we're like, this is where we are. I mean, this is as far as I'm going to get in sailing. So by the time people get into work on Monday, generally they're pretty like, okay, whatever, next event. Whereas the kids get to school on Monday and they may actually still be like thinking about that one bad tack or that one bad maneuver that they had just made on the race course. And, oh, how could that have gotten me to the top 20 or gotten me into Gold Fleet? Because that all matters to them. So I think in the grand scheme of things, like big picture, I think the kids are way more hard on themselves. So
The kids haven't got used yet to a lifetime of failure and disappointment.
Correct. Correct. I think it's so different. Like I said, the kids are so much more big picture mistakes than the adults are more little picture mistakes.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I mean, on the race course, doing big boat sailing, I always get together with my crew after a race and I say, where we lost perf by 33 seconds, and you're like, where could we have picked up that 33 seconds? Was it this tack? Was it this leg? Was it, this mark rounding? Where these kids aren't thinking about the seconds. They're like, how could I have got that to be the perfect race? It was this tack on this leg exactly here where I could have put my foot a little bit more forward on that roll tack. And really, they're just so much more in tune with every single little detail of their races because they don't have that lifetime of racing to look back on. They're only focusing on that one thing. And it really helps them focus in and kind of self-coach, I would say.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There are some great lessons here, aren't there, for older sailors? I hate to say older sailors, anybody over 20. We had a really interesting conversation a few days ago about my assumption that these kids are going to be so hot on technology, but that's not the case.
It's really not. You have a lot of kids in and outside of their school classrooms where, they're kind of glued to their screens, where when they're sailing, you're too busy and you're too focused. And I think the focus is really something that they get to experience on the water because they don't have all of that distraction. And, when they're on these keel boats and they're entered into these bigger regattas and everybody has electronics on their mast, it doesn't make sense to them. They've been analog sailing for their whole lives. And when you hand them a piece of technology that says, this is how you know if you're doing better or worse, they're like, why? They know that the line is sagging because they've been practicing that for the past 6 years. They don't need tech to tell them that.
That is so interesting, and it is quite an unexpected answer, actually.
Yeah, I find they just don't love it. They don't. It's funny. Thursday night racing, I had an experience with a boat full of college sailors, and we forgot to bring the machinery out with us. So we just decided to go back to our college 3-minute starting sequence. We won every race that night. It wasn't even close. It's just crazy how dependent some people start getting on this technology because it's great. It's awesome for those that don't have all the starting practice. I think it actually evens out the fleet because of that. You're seeing these people that used to be midline sag that are now no longer midline sag because of this technology, but it's the kids don't need it. The kids can college star, high school star all day long with no issues and be within 3 meters of the starting line and understand, oh, this is a headed tack or this is a lifted tack.
So what do you find are the hardest skills to teach younger sailors?
Yeah, I think the hardest skills is actually not a lot of the actual things that you're teaching these kids. It's the focus side of things with these kids. Before we just talked about technology, they have 5-second thoughts all the time, 5 to 10-second thoughts, because that's how long a TikTok is, right? So getting them to buckle in and actually put in the focus and effort it takes to sail a boat is really difficult. But once they get it and they understand it, then everything is easy to teach kids. Kids are very teachable these days, especially with the on-land technology that we have nowadays. I can take a video of a kid doing a tack and show it to him 30 minutes later up in the classroom. It's hard to get a kid to stare at telltales for 10 minutes. It is. It's not easy. But once they realize how much faster they are when they do it that way, it's game changing for them.
Another one of the hardest things that is for junior sailors, but also for coaches is problem solving. There's no ChatGPT on the water. There's no one to tell you, like a junior sailor, oh, this block fell off. How do I replace this block on my boat? How do I jury rig something to get around the race course? How do I limp around? How do I figure out what side of the race course is favored without my coach whispering in my ear, that kind of thing. So teaching them the independence on the water is difficult, but it's worth the effort that you put into it because you get the results that the kids really enjoy. They get that dopamine hit from succeeding on the water.
What are the skills and behaviors that junior sailors already sort of show up with from the beginning?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is their fearlessness and their willingness to just go out and whatever. No fear. Our kids come up to us when it's blowing 30 knots and they're like, can we go out in the water today? And I'm like, what? We had a really funny practice a couple years ago with our team that we brought to nationals, and They wanted to sail in big breeze. They're like, we don't sail in big breeze enough. It was probably blowing about 40 from the Severn River. So we decided to take them out to the Severn River and see how that would play out. Obviously, we had a lot of safety boats on the water that day. I think we had 4 different coach boats on the water, and we took out 5 sailboats. So we were definitely safe in the process because we knew it was going to be absolute chaos. As soon as we turned that corner, the Navy team had their sails down and were getting towed in. And our kids were basically on a treadmill going upwind. It was gnarly. And when we turned downwind, it got gnarlier. These kids were getting launched from their boats pitch pole style in an FJ. Every single time I went up to one of them, they were like, that was awesome, with the biggest smile on their face. And like, they're having the time of their lives.
That's funny.
And those kids will still message me every once in a while and be like, hey, remember that practice? And so these kids will go out in whatever you tell them to go out in, and they will, put all their effort into it. And that is just something that you can't coach anybody, especially adults.
I bet you didn't show the video of the pitch polling to their mums.
Luckily for me, I actually didn't take any video that day. But yeah, it was a blast.
It's also nice because some parents don't know what pitch polling is. So the stories they bring home, might go over their heads a little bit.
Better to keep them in the dark. So the other day you talked about overcoaching, Travis, as something that's a problem. What exactly do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I find one of these is a controversial topic, I'll probably say, but the other one I find is the steering. The tiller switch is one of them. That's not the controversial one, in my opinion. That's just one that I think is just overcoached in so many ways. There's kids that have their own way of doing a tiller swap, and it works for them. And I always say, as a coach, you give them what might work for them. But so many people have such odd styles of sailing that work really well for them. So I think it's really important to give them advice and, tell them, hey, this is the proper way to do it. But if this is working for you, keep doing it. If it's not slowing you down, be yourself, be you, do what makes you fast. And there's another thing that I think is overcoached, and that's rules. They are overcoached in junior sailing nowadays, in my opinion. And I think that could be a controversial topic. But the rules are kind of used as a sword in fleet racing in junior sailing now, rather than a shield in fleet racing, which I think is a real problem nowadays. Rules should really be used as a defense for getting fouled on the race course, rather than using them like you would in team racing as to gain an advantage on the fleet. A lot of the time you'll see kids coming in on port tack ley line and just throw it in at the windward mark with no regard, knowing that if they do a 360, they just jump the line by 15 boats, and they're still gaining those kind of places by doing those things. So it's, hey, let me just throw in a foul gear, do my 360, and I've gained 15 boats.
Shit, if only I'd known that.
Yeah, what's faster?
So I think that is something that really needs to be mentioned in junior sailing and really pushed. I push our coaches to make sure our kids aren't doing that. And I encourage every other program to do the same thing.
Okay, I'd like to get it back a little bit to what older sailors can learn from
Sure.
junior sailors. What's one junior style drill adults should absolutely be doing, to your mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that's the easiest, whether you have one boat on the water or 5 boats on the water, is a time and distance drill. If you're struggling with your starts, time and distance drills are going to be massively helpful with your starting sequence. Understanding how long it's going to take that boat to get up to speed, what your crew needs to do to get the boat there, and how much of a gap, where you need to approach the line. If you want to start, pin middle, boat middle, wherever you want to start, you have to take into account how much time and distance is going to take you to get there. If you don't know the length of the starting line and you don't know how long it takes you to get from boat to pin, how do you know what time you need to approach to win the pin? Or how do you know when it's time to approach the boat if you don't know what your speed and distance is? So going out there, finding something stationary and doing an approach from almost dead stop, learning how to get your flow, and then getting back into it. And honestly, sailing backwards, it could be a really big help for any adults, because what I find is once someone gets flow going backwards on their rudder, a lot of people tend to just shove that rudder over to try and balance that out, and they're not actually helping that boat gain flow again. It's really about your boat's going to slide sideways once you lose flow. That's just what's going to happen. So steering against that slide isn't helping at all because you don't have flow over your foils to get the boat moving forward. So understanding what you need to do with the tiller or your wheel to get that boat back moving is really important. And I think backwards sailing can help just as much as your time and distance with getting set up on the race course and getting ready for a start.
I think it's important to go out there and do some speed matching drills. You're in a one design boat. All these kids have been in one design boats, and they're trying to match speed or beat speed. So find somebody in your fleet that's at your level or slightly above your level, and make sure that you're matching speed and make sure that your boats are set up right before you start.
Hey, one thing I'm curious about is how much you teach the junior sailors about the sort of the airflow and sort of aero hydrodynamics and that sort of thing. Is that part of it or not?
Yes, it is 100% part of it. Definitely not for the brand new sailors. Definitely for more like the high school age is when that starts to come into play. We'll go over the lift of a boat and understanding how flow works, how sails work, and how your angles work on a boat. Not everyone is going to understand it because some of the way that boats work is well above a high school education level, right? I mean, you're talking physics, dynamics, all those sort of things that play into sailboats. But if you can just simplify it for the kids, there are a lot of kids that think like that and they want to know why the boat's behaving the way it's behaving. And if you can give them that information and be like, this is why the boat's behaving like this, then they start to understand why we're doing what we're doing on the water. Some kids are just naturally gifted with how to make a boat go fast. They don't need to know why. They can just do it. There are some sailors that are really dialed into every single number, every single angle, lift, all of that stuff. And then there's people that are just like, I don't know, I just make the boat go fast. Like it's crazy.
I mean, we've had junior sailors who, you know, you can show them every single aspect of the boat and how to make it go on a whiteboard, and they can repeat it right back to you. And when you put them on a boat, they have no idea what's going on. And then the total opposite, where you can read books all day long and they won't suck up a single word, but you put them on a boat and they're like, oh, when the wind hits the sail like this, the keel keeps it from going this way. And they're just like spitting physics at you all of a sudden. Seeing how kids learn and how they coach it back to you it's a really interesting thing.
That must also play into adults as well. We haven't stopped being kids. There must
Yeah.
be some of us who have no idea about the physics but have some feel for it, and also the other way around.
Yeah, there's certainly some people, I'm sure you've run into them, that are just really good at making a boat go fast. And that's what it is. And then there's people that want to know every little down to the wire what's going on with numbers, and it's hard to deal with that as a coach. You got to teach every angle of it. You have to teach the see, feel, hear, all that stuff.
What's one skill that juniors that you see master earlier than adults?
It starts, if you see a junior sailor on a race course, they're going to be killer at starts. They might have a couple bad ones every once in a while, but they're going to be way more consistent.
Yeah.
And they have just so much more repetition at it. They start probably thousands of times per year if they're in a race program.
Wow. And Madde, is the one thing that adult racers should stop overthinking?
Age as a limiting factor or an excuse for subpar performance. I am absolutely guilty of this with juniors on my race course. I've been asked to jump in an FJ and come out and, race against these kids. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm too old for that. But in reality, like, I don't want my pride to be shattered by losing against an 8-year-old in an FJ. Just because you might not have the same motion that you used to have, you still have the skill. And there's always something to learn and something to give on the race course.
Wow. Okay, that put me in my place. The Severn Sailing Association has such a great reputation in the Annapolis area. It's a really great program, generates great sailors, and got a great vibe to it. I know that. What excites you most about where you see the SSA junior program heading now?
I'll speak to this a little bit. I think that we're really fortunate to have a club that supports us and trusts our ideas for the future of sailing. Right now, we're about to start our second year of offering a 29-hour development team, which is super. And, this year we have a second kind of team for that with a racing development team. We're implementing an ILCA 4 racing development team, which is new in this area. And it's kind of been a missing piece in our area for a while. And we're starting to really get the conversation going about the future of foiling and sailing. And, having a club that supports us in doing all of this is essential to our success.
Yeah, right with her. It's 29ers, and then the foiling side of things, and then just having a good relationship with U.S. Sailing and working with a bunch of different private programs and running clinics and just making us a pretty central area. So it's really easy for us to host clinics and have a lot of people travel to our venue because it's kind of right in the middle of a lot of people that are sailors.
So thinking about trying to keep that pipeline from junior through to adult sailor intact, what are some of the things that we as a sailing community can do to facilitate that? Because clearly it's really vital to the health of this sport that we love.
It's inclusion of the junior sailors, holding out your hand, giving them a helping hand when you see them at the club. What I find is the most detrimental to youth sailing is the people that are curmudgeons, for lack of a better word, towards the junior sailors. They're too loud, they make a mess, all that sort of stuff. To be honest, after some adult sailing parties at sailing clubs, they've left the club a lot more of a mess than the junior sailors have. So give them a break. They're kids. They do a fairly good job of picking up after each other, but we've all done it. We've all left our clubs a mess. And I think it's just so important for us to continue to motivate them to continue go sailing, invite them out on your boat, give them those opportunities, and that'll keep them in the sport.
I completely agree with Travis. One of the things that the community can do is just accept them, give them space on the launching ramp, invite them out on your loaner boat that you might have, a club loaner boat. I know the Lightning Fleet has an all junior grant to have a boat in the big national regattas, and SSA has a snipe that they can lend out. And, we have extra lasers for kids to go out on. So just really inviting them and letting them know that they're welcome is going to help everybody in the pipeline.
Well, this has been a really educational and interesting 45 minutes. There are so many lessons here for not just for older sailors, but also for sailing clubs. As I said earlier, it's so vital to make sure, as you guys talked about, having a wide base of the triangle to push younger sailors through. So glad you came on to talk about this. Thank you for everything you're doing. And thank you for coming on to SailFaster.
Thank you. We appreciated your time spending with us and learning about junior sailing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting us on and letting us talk about it.
Brilliant. I look forward to seeing you and your juniors on the water.
Thanks. The kids are all right.